Most people got birthday cards when they turned 30. I got disownment papers. Looking back, that probably should have surprised me more than it did. My parents had always treated me like some weird combination of a family member and a business investment. Growing up, every conversation somehow came back to money. Do you know how expensive children are? That was my mother's version of, I love you. My father was even better. Whenever report cards came home, he didn't ask if I was happy. He wanted to know if good grades qualified for tax credits. By the time I moved out at 22, I figured I'd finally escaped their financial obsession. I paid my own rent, bought my own groceries, handled my own insurance, and filed my own taxes. Apparently, my parents had other ideas. My 30th birthday started normally enough. I spent the day answering work emails and pretending to enjoy messages from distant relatives who suddenly remembered I existed because social media reminded them. That evening, my parents invited me over for dinner. I considered saying no. Experience had taught me that family dinners usually involved either criticism or requests for money. Still, it was my birthday. Maybe they'd changed. That was my first mistake. The dining room looked strangely festive when I arrived. There were balloons, decorations, and a giant cake sitting in the center of the table. For one brief moment, I thought they had actually planned something nice. Then I noticed the cake. Instead of Happy 30th Birthday, written across the frosting were the numbers 2018 to 2025. I stared at it. What are those? My father smiled proudly. The tax years. I blinked. The what? The tax years? He repeated. Your mother thought it would be sentimental. My mother nodded enthusiastically. It's the period during which you generated the highest financial value. I looked at the cake. Then at them. Then back at the cake. You put accounting statistics on my birthday cake. Of course, my mother said. What else would we put? I suddenly wished the candles were dynamite. Dinner somehow became worse. My father spent 20 minutes discussing depreciation schedules. My mother explained how grocery prices had increased since I was born as if I personally controlled inflation. Halfway through dessert, my father cleared his throat dramatically. We have something important to discuss. I immediately regretted coming. My mother pulled a thick folder from beside her chair and slid it across the table. I opened it. Legal documents. Lots of them. I frowned. What is this? My parents exchanged nervous glances. Then my father said the sentence that officially destroyed whatever remained of our relationship. The government is auditing us. I stared. Okay. It appears, my mother said carefully, that there may have been some minor misunderstandings involving tax filings. Define minor. We may have claimed you as a dependent. I laughed. They didn't. My laughter slowly died. They absolutely did. You claimed me as a dependent? I asked. For several years. I've lived on my own for 8 years. Details, my father said. That's not a detail. That's the entire definition of being independent. My mother pushed the papers closer. The auditors suggested that legally separating ourselves from you might simplify matters. I looked down. Disownment paperwork. On my birthday. Served right after cake. Honestly, the efficiency was almost impressive. So let me understand this, I said. You invited me to a birthday dinner so you could legally stop being my parents? Technically, yes, my father admitted. My mother smiled awkwardly. We still care about you. You literally printed documents proving otherwise. The silence that followed was magnificent. Finally, I picked up a pen. My parents brightened immediately. They actually thought I was upset because I wanted their approval. Instead, I signed every page. Their smiles vanished. That's it? My father asked. That's it. You're not angry? I stood up. No. And surprisingly, I wasn't. For the first time in my life, I felt free. If they wanted to reduce our relationship to paperwork, then paperwork it would be. I grabbed my jacket and headed toward the door. As I reached my car, my phone rang. The caller ID displayed an unfamiliar government number. Curious, I answered. A calm voice spoke immediately. Mr. Carter? This is the auditor assigned to your parents' case. There's something regarding a vacation property that you need to know. I stopped walking. Something in his tone made my stomach tighten. What kind of property? There was a pause. Then he said words that would completely change my life. The kind that legally belongs to you now. For several seconds, I stood beside my car wondering if the government auditor had accidentally called the wrong person. Legally belongs to me? Yes, the auditor replied. It's a complicated situation involving property records, tax filings, and several extremely questionable decisions made by your parents. That sounds exactly like something my parents would do. The man actually laughed. Then you'll probably understand the paperwork. 3 days later, I found myself driving toward a coastal vacation community that I had only heard about through my parents' endless bragging. Apparently, while they were busy claiming me as a dependent, they had also made a spectacular series of filing errors involving their vacation home. Those errors became bigger problems when the audit started. One legal review led to another. One signature connected to another. One correction triggered another. Eventually, a very confused government office concluded that ownership had accidentally transferred into my name. My parents had spent years treating me like a tax deduction. Now I owned their favorite property. Life had a strange sense of humor. The vacation home sat on a beautiful stretch of coastline overlooking the ocean. I expected something modest. Instead, I found a massive luxury property that looked like a rich person's dream retirement plan. I climbed out of my car and stared. This place costs more than my entire future. That's usually how vacation homes work. I turned. The voice belonged to an incredibly attractive woman standing nearby. Dark hair. Bright eyes. Confident smile. The kind of smile that instantly made a man forget half the words in the English language. Fortunately, I only forgot about 40%. Hello? I managed. Hello yourself? She walked over and offered her hand. I manage the neighboring resort. I shook it. The moment our hands touched, something felt oddly electric. Not painful. Just unexpected. For a brief second, her expression mirrored my surprise before she quickly recovered. Interesting. Very interesting. So you're the new owner? She asked. Apparently. How does that happen? My parents committed accounting crimes. She blinked. Then she burst out laughing. Not polite laughter. Real laughter. The kind that made her lean forward slightly while trying unsuccessfully to regain control. I like you already? Most people do after hearing the full story. We spent the next hour walking around the property. She knew everything about the area. The restaurants. The beaches. The local businesses. The hidden scenic spots tourists never found. Talking to her felt effortless. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't thinking about betrayal, audits, or family drama. I was simply enjoying someone's company. Which was why it was especially tragic when my peace exploded 24 hours later. I was sitting on the deck overlooking the water when 3 luxury vehicles came racing into the driveway. The doors flew open. My parents emerged. Suddenly. Magically. And with more affection than they had shown during the previous decade. Ethan! My mother shouted. My son! My father added. I nearly fell out of my chair. Yesterday they had legally disowned me. Today they were acting like contestants in a family reunion commercial. My father rushed forward and attempted a hug. The attempt was awkward because he seemed unfamiliar with the process. His arms moved like someone assembling furniture without instructions. I stepped aside. He almost hugged a patio chair instead. What are you doing here? I asked. My parents exchanged nervous smiles. We've been thinking, my mother said. About? Family. I stared. They stared. The ocean stared. Nobody believed that answer. Finally my father sighed. You own the house, don't you? There it is. The truth had arrived. Right on schedule. My parents immediately launched into a series of arguments explaining why the property should return to them. Some were emotional. Some were financial. One involved astrology for reasons nobody understood. Throughout the entire performance, I noticed movement near the neighboring resort. The beautiful manager stood watching from a distance. She was trying very hard not to laugh. And failing completely. Unfortunately for my parents, things were about to get much worse. Because later that evening, she arrived carrying a folder. A very thick folder. And according to her smile, whatever was inside was going to ruin someone's day. Probably not mine. The folder landed on the table with enough weight to make me nervous. Not because I thought I was in trouble. At this point, trouble seemed to follow my parents around like a loyal pet. The beautiful resort manager sat across from me and slowly opened the file. "I did some research," she said. I laughed. "That sentence has never ended well for anyone." Her smile widened. "You are correct." Inside were copies of financial documents, property records, corporate filings, and enough paperwork to make an accountant cry. I stared at the stack. "Please tell me this isn't homework." "Unfortunately, it is." Over the next hour, she walked me through what she had discovered. The tax fraud involving my parents was apparently just the beginning. There were questionable business deductions, suspicious ownership transfers, creative accounting strategies that seemed to have been invented during moments of complete panic. And somehow my name appeared throughout many of those records. The more I learned, the more ridiculous everything became. My parents hadn't simply treated me like a dependent. They had practically turned me into a financial mascot. I leaned back in my chair. "I spent my childhood thinking they barely noticed me." She nodded sympathetically. "They noticed you." "Really?" "They just noticed your tax value more than your emotional value." I couldn't even argue with that. The next few days became a whirlwind of government meetings and investigations. The auditors who had originally been interested in a simple tax issue suddenly became very interested in everything else. Apparently, government employees get excited when financial fraud starts multiplying. Meanwhile, my parents entered what I privately called their desperation era. Every day brought a new scheme. One morning my father arrived carrying old photo albums. He spent 30 minutes pointing at random children and claiming they were me. "Dad, that's clearly a girl. The lighting is bad. The picture says Ashley's 5th birthday." He closed the album. "Still not conclusive." The following day my mother attempted emotional manipulation. She arrived with homemade cookies. That alone should have triggered alarms. My mother had never baked voluntarily in her life. The cookies tasted suspiciously like they came from a supermarket package. Halfway through the visit she casually mentioned transferring the vacation home back into their names. What a coincidence. As their plans became increasingly ridiculous, my relationship with the resort manager grew stronger. We spent evenings walking along the shoreline, talking for hours, laughing constantly. For the first time in years, I felt genuinely happy. She was smart, funny, confident, and somehow fascinated by things most people considered ordinary. She asked questions about humanity with unusual curiosity. Why humans kept pets. Why we enjoyed terrible reality television. Why people willingly attended family reunions. Honestly, I didn't have answers for most of those. One evening we sat together watching the sunset paint the ocean gold. There was a comfortable silence between us. Then she took a deep breath. "I need to tell you something." Those words usually worried me. But her expression looked more nervous than dangerous. "What is it?" She stared toward the horizon. "I'm not exactly from around here." I laughed. "I figured you moved from another state." "Further than that." Something shimmered briefly around her hand. For less than a second, I saw faint blue patterns beneath her skin. My brain stopped functioning. Then restarted. Then stopped again. "I may actually be from another planet." Silence. Waves crashed against the shore. A seagull screamed in the distance. My entire understanding of reality exploded. Oddly enough, that wasn't the strangest thing that had happened during the week. I considered everything carefully. Then I shrugged. My parents disowned me on my birthday because of tax fraud. She blinked. What? I'm just saying my standards for normal are different these days. For a moment she stared at me. Then she laughed so hard she nearly fell off the bench. The sound was contagious. Soon both of us were laughing. When the laughter finally faded, she looked at me differently. Warmer. Softer. Almost affectionate. You humans are impossible. That's one of our better qualities. The next morning things escalated again. Government investigators officially expanded their case. My parents' financial empire was beginning to collapse. And just when I thought life couldn't become any stranger, she revealed one final secret. Her people knew about me. They had been watching. And apparently they wanted to meet the human who responded to betrayal, fraud, and family disaster by somehow becoming happier. I had no idea what that meant. But judging by her smile, my adventure was far from over. If someone had told me a month earlier that I would be sitting inside an alien spacecraft discussing human tax fraud with extraterrestrial diplomats, I would have recommended professional therapy. Yet there I was. The ship floated silently above the ocean, hidden behind technology so advanced it made science fiction look outdated. Across from me sat a group of alien representatives. They looked mostly human, though their eyes occasionally shimmered with strange colors. One of them was studying a report on my parents. Very carefully. Very seriously. Finally, he looked up. We have reviewed the records. I nodded. And? He looked genuinely disturbed. The complexity is terrifying. I frowned. The fraud? The tax code? The entire room fell silent. Then several aliens nodded in agreement. One of them spoke quietly. No civilization should have this many forms. For the first time in weeks, I laughed until my stomach hurt. Apparently humanity's greatest defense against alien invasion wasn't military power. It was paperwork. Over the following days, the investigation concluded. The government recovered years of fraudulent filings. Financial penalties arrived. Assets were frozen. Court dates were scheduled. My parents spent most of their time arguing with lawyers. They also continued attempting to negotiate. At one point, my father actually asked whether I would trade the vacation house in exchange for a heartfelt apology. His proposed apology was 3 sentences long. One sentence blamed the government. One blamed inflation. The last blamed me. I declined. Surprisingly, I wasn't angry anymore. Somewhere during the chaos, I had stopped caring about winning against them. I had already won. Not because I owned the property. Not because the investigation exposed their schemes. Not because their plans failed. I won because their actions no longer controlled my life. That realization felt better than any revenge ever could. Meanwhile, the vacation property became unexpectedly successful. The neighboring resort partnered with me. Tourism increased. New events were organized. Visitors arrived from around the world. Some even arrived from places significantly farther away. Officially, of course, they were foreign tourists. Unofficially, several had traveled across multiple star systems. The beautiful resort manager remained by my side through everything. What began as playful conversations became something much deeper. She challenged me, supported me, made me laugh, and somehow managed to make alien diplomacy feel normal. One evening we stood together on the balcony overlooking the ocean. The sunset painted the water gold. A warm breeze drifted across the shoreline. For a while neither of us spoke. Then she slipped her hand into mine. My people offered me a position off-world. I looked at her. That sounds important. It is. My stomach tightened slightly. But I turned it down. I blinked. You did? She smiled. Yes. Why? The answer came without hesitation. Because you're here. For a moment I couldn't think of anything clever to say. Which was unusual. I normally used humor to survive uncomfortable emotions. This time I simply squeezed her hand. And that was enough. A year later, my 31st birthday arrived. The difference between this birthday and the previous one was almost unbelievable. Instead of legal paperwork, there was a celebration. Instead of betrayal, there were friends. Instead of being treated like a tax deduction, I was surrounded by people who genuinely cared about me. The resort staff had even placed a plaque on my office door. I discovered it while arriving for the party. The plaque read, "Former tax deduction. Current owner." I laughed so hard I nearly dropped my coffee. As evening arrived, everyone gathered near the beach. Music played. Lights reflected across the water. The woman I loved stood beside me while friends filled the shoreline with laughter. For the first time in my life, I felt completely at home. I looked toward the vacation house that had started this entire adventure. A symbol of greed had somehow become the foundation of a better future. Funny how life works sometimes. Raising my glass, I smiled at the crowd. Turns out getting disowned was the best birthday gift I ever received. The laughter that followed carried across the ocean. And somewhere beyond the stars, an entire alien civilization had already added a new lesson to its records. Never underestimate humans. Especially the ones who can turn family betrayal, tax fraud, and complete disaster into a love story with a happy ending.